Hi there. Glad to be here with all of you. All right. So, my idea around art and what art is, as was introduced, very, very simple. And part of the reason that I came up with this kind of simple idea about art is because, as you heard from my introduction, I've spent my life really with contemporary art. And I know that contemporary art can be weird or scary for people. And so, part of what I'm trying to do is to make it more accessible and to do something that I'm now thinking about as art plus. So it's art and in its traditional form, but it's also more than that. And it's about this idea of intention and why we do what we do, why it started for me with why artists do what they do, and then thinking about how it can be personalized and how we can choose to be in the world and be with the world and be of the world. So at the essence of what I learned, and I really started thinking about all of this during the pandemic, is that works of art can really keep us company. And so that's one of the things that I hope we can keep in mind as we talk today. So this is a Mark Rothko painting, and this is what people probably think about when you hear the idea of modern art. And I'm standing here today because I know a lot about art, and I love art. And my goal today is not to try and convince any of you guys to love art, but to just kind of share in a way, why I love it and what it means to me. So when I first started out, I had a very traditional idea of what art is. I thought it was paintings like this Mark Rothko or sculptures. And one of the things that I've sort of come to as time has passed is that if things are done with intention, then really anything can be art. So cooking can be art. Tattooing can be art. Gardening can be art. Your golf swing can be art. And having that more expanded view of art, I think it makes life much more beautiful. And I think that beauty is something that is very desirable. So this new definition, I think, makes life more joyful and allows for more curiosity. So where it comes from is this idea that when someone looks at something that they may not think could be a work of art, like a piece of string or a cup that came from your cupboard, and someone asks the question like, well, why is that art? Or how do you know? My definition is really just that if the person who made it says that it's art, then it's art. Full stop, right? It's very helpful. Then you as the viewer get to decide, well, do I like it? Right? So then it puts it back on the person looking at it to have some kind of authority, to have some kind of agency. But no one can say it's not art. And I think that's really important. So kind of keep that in mind as we keep talking. Because one of the things that was said about me in the introduction too is that I do believe that access to art is a basic human right, and it's because of this idea of what matters in the world, and how do we choose to live. So I do also believe at my core that art can be for anyone, even if it's not for everyone. And so, I do some kind of proselytizing. So just be forewarned. So, all right. So this work does contain a swear word. So full disclosure, I did an exhibition at the Aspen Art Museum that was called Zombies Pay Attention. And I was looking at, popular culture, and there seemed to be, this is pre-pandemic, but there seemed to be this just preponderance of these zombie films and TV shows. And actually the Zombie Apocalypse Guide was a New York Times bestseller for, years. So one of the keys about how to survive in a zombie apocalypse is that you have to pay attention. And the idea is that a lot of times people are just kind of going through the motion. They're alive, but they're not really living. And so, what does it mean to pay attention and to actually be alive? So this is a work by an artist named Bruce Nauman. He's an American conceptual artist and actually was from not very far from here, grew up in this area. And this text is written in mirrored language. So it's as if you're looking at a mirror and it's reflected back to you. So it's really asking the question of you, and it's a command. It's pretty aggressive. And, it's asking this idea, though, of what does it feel like to just kind of wake up every day, get in your car, go through your commute, drive through the Starbucks line? And how is that different than being vibrant, engaged, curious, allowing oneself to be surprised, to say yes, to come out here to Redlands, from some random person who approached me in the museum, right? Saying yes to things that, you don't really know where you're going to go or where you're going to end up, but having that opportunity to pay attention in a different way. So I have all of these images paired with these questions. Earlier this week, there was in the New York Times an opinion piece, a sort of contemporary manifesto of sorts, written by David Brooks. And it's not someone that I always agree with, but I was really taken by this piece. And in fact, I read it twice on Sunday, and I sent it to both my kids, and I sent it to the chairman of our board and our senior staff. And it really kind of struck a tone for me. The title was How to Save a Sad, Lonely, Angry, and Mean Society. So I've been thinking a lot about this. I'm kind of going off script, but I'm going to talk about it for a second. I've been thinking a lot about this mean girl idea. And there was a reference to this children's book that I'd written that was called The Rainbow Hour. And so I'm working on a sequel, and it's actually called Nice Girl. And it's countercultural, and it's about empathy, and it's about kindness. So I was struck by this question of, what is a sad society? What is a lonely society? I already said I think works of art can keep you company, and we know that visits to museums are being prescribed now by psychiatrists in Belgium as a way of combating anxiety and combating social isolation. So I think we know what a sad and a lonely society looks like. I think we also sort of know what an angry and a mean society looks like. And so I think there's an opportunity to combat that by sort of telling things as they are, like as we see them. And I think that's called leadership. And I know that sometimes that's not popular. So one of the things that Brooks wrote about is he said, attention is a moral act. And I love that word moral. And I love this idea of what it means and morality. And I'll come back to it later. But he said, attention is a moral act. The key to becoming a better person, as was written by philosopher and author Iris Murdoch, is to be able to cast a just and loving attention on others. It is to shed the self-serving way of looking at the world and to see things as they really are. We can, Murdoch argued, grow by looking. So the question is, how and what are you looking at? Where are you casting your eyes? Where are you averting them? What are you seeing? And to what and how are you paying attention? The decision, I think, to truly see is what creates empathy. And I think empathy deepens awareness. So as it is asking here on the screen, are you living or are you alive? So this is a work by an artist named Fred Tomaselli, also an American artist. And I have this concept that all works of art are self-portraits. that they're self-portraits of the person who made them, but they're also self-portraits of the person that is looking at them. And it really comes in handy when people are looking at a work of art and they're like, oh, that's stupid. Or, like, I don't get that. Or like, I could do that. It's like, well, all works of art are self-portraits, right? Of the artist, but also the person who made them. And, being a little bit kind of tongue in cheek, but the idea is, whose voice is in your head. And I think that, we're all dynamic human beings with a wide range of life experiences. And, there are often lots of different types of voices in our head. And they, may change throughout the day. Sometimes the voice is motivating, empowering. Sometimes the voice is, judging or condemning, disempowering. On a personal note, I grew up in a home where the sentiment was that any achievement that was done, couldn't have been that hard. And so, there's a really kind of familiar voice in my head, which kind of evolved over time from I haven't done enough to I'm not enough. And, that's just one of the voices, but that was a voice to um, it wasn't always the best voice. And so, I'm curious for all of you, if you were to close your eyes and to listen to the voice that's in your head, is it a positive voice? And is it a supportive voice, or is it a voice a lot like, the I'm not enough voice? And if I was to kind of quote science here, it's part of our DNA to have a negativity bias. For a long time, we needed the negativity bias to survive in nature. And to be able to have a positivity bias, it takes effort. So this question, whose voice is in your head? And I now have my own children, and I want them to have a different voice in their head. So for me, I have a practice and a commitment to be their biggest fan and to intentionally encourage their efforts, to emphasize successes and to support hard choices regardless of the outcome. And so the voice and the commitment is reassurance and encouragement. And when I ask you again, whose voice is in your head, I hope to add or to suggest that some of these ideas could be added. You are beautiful. You are enough. I believe in you. I love you. So we can intentionally choose to act from that reassuring voice, even if there's another voice that's in there. So this is an artist named Liz Marcus. She is a local California artist. And when I look at this work, it, for me, represents fear. And I have a question about where fear resides in our bodies. And is it in your eyes, like here, kind of creating heat? Is it in your stomach? That's where I feel it. Sometimes it makes me feel cold. Does it resonate in your heart? Does it make you feel anxious? And here, the question is, of what are you most afraid? So sometimes when I give a talk, I get a little bit nervous, but I came here early and you guys all seemed really friendly and we're kind of dressed the same. So I was like, okay, this is going to be good. And, but, a few years ago, I had this practice where I did something every day that I was afraid of. And when I started this commitment, the list was really long. And as I started to do something every day that I was afraid of, and sometimes it was something physical. I'm not particularly physically brave, but I'm mentally fierce. But sometimes it was just having a conversation with someone that I had maybe had a falling out with, or anyway, it was a variety of different things. One of the things that I did that I was most afraid of doing was taking singing lessons. So it's so much harder than you think it is. Well, I'll say it differently. It was so much harder than I thought it was going to be. It's very physical. Anyway, I love this idea of kind of approaching our fears. And again, I said contemporary art, can be weird or scary. People can be afraid of it. And so part of this idea is to show ways to approach contemporary art and to ask questions. So um, I'd love to know this answer for all of you, of what are you most afraid, and come up and tell me after, or find me on social media. So this is a work by an artist named Marilyn Minter. And I love this idea of, if you're looking for the face of God, look no further than in the eyes of the next person you meet. And, that's I think, pretty good definition of empathy. As, we're looking to figure out, what we have in common instead of what we have different. This idea is, if you can't find it, stop and, look a little harder in that next person's eyes. So here, in this work, in this image that's presented, can you or do you see the face of God? So we talked a little bit about whose voice you hear, and in this work, whose eye, might you see? And I really like this idea of also trying to find the eye of God in ourselves, and when you look in the mirror. So this eye for me is kind of extra beautiful because of the sparkles, and and this kind of spark of life, or the spark of life in the eye. And it's said, of course, that the eyes are the vehicle into the soul. And so I really like this idea of, if you're looking at life through this lens and looking for beauty in the world, where do you find it? And can we find beauty in places that allow us to live with more grace? So this is, I think, part of this idea of living with intention, this idea of living life as art. And this is a work by an artist named Claire Rojas. I really like this idea that, all those who wander are not lost. So in this work, there is a lot of things happening. There is this snake right here, and there's a bunny over there, and I really like bunnies. There is this sort of abstract form here, which might be a path, or it might be an oil spill. There are a lot of birds flying around. There's this kind of like rainbow path with a figure that's probably a woman, but it might be a guy with long hair. There are a few figures up at the top who are looking maybe into the abyss. But maybe they're just figuring out where they're going next. And when I look at this work, I like to think about who do I identify with there, and where might I be focused on a certain day as opposed to where I might be on a different day. And there's a notion that's called coddywampling. It's one of my favorite words. It's an old English word, and it means to walk with purpose towards an unknown direction. So to walk with purpose towards an unknown direction. And I think that we probably spend a lot of our life doing that. And I really like this idea of not necessarily knowing. And you'll see it, this concept of surrender comes up a little bit later in my talk. But, when we pay attention, and one of the things I didn't say earlier is that Bruce Nauman work, the Pay Attention Mother, was sort of like a mantra of sorts for me, because, I talked about how I was interested in kind of, proselytizing about contemporary art and how it matters and why I want people to care about it. And so I was more sort of assertive about that. Like I wanted people to be interested in art and believe in art. And I've sort of softened my approach. And, I have sort of a new mantra that you'll see at the end. But I do like this idea of obviously being intentional. And And so moving with purpose is an intentional act as well. So this is a work by an artist named Paul Chan. And these figures are dancing, and they are free to dance, but you can see that they're also connected to this power source, right? And so when the fans are turned off, they die. They fall down. They become inanimate, no longer active, and there is, I think, this notion in our life of when we can feel free, and also to, what are we bound and how are we constricted, and what can you do if you have nowhere to go but these pre-established notions? So this is obviously kind of a banal material. I saw one of these figures when we were driving here. You've probably seen one at a used car place or like a car wash, right? They're like waving in the wind, and so it's, I think, quite interesting when artists take a material that's familiar and they do something different with it. So here he's influenced by Matisse, the dance on the upper right, or Botticelli's Primavera. It's in the Uffizi, one of my favorite works of all time. And so here you have the three graces dancing. So when you think about a traditional art form, a Renaissance artist, and then a modernist artist, and then it's paired with a contemporary artist, you can see that they're not necessarily these arbitrary decisions. It's intentionally trying to create something which is referential, but also differentiated as well. So those choices are interesting, different, and exciting. So the question here is, what turns you on? So I love spending time with my family. We sit for family dinner every night that we can. And we have a tradition. It's, some of you might do it, two goods and a bad. Some people call it like two roses and a thorn. And anyone that sits with us, we have guests over, kids, friends, everyone does it, two goods and a bad. And we had this young girl over one day and she said, well, can I do like two goods and a meh? And I was like, nope, like two goods and a bad. And so one of the things that happens with this practice is that we learn about the day. And it's interesting because something that someone else might think is good might be something that would be someone else's bad. Or when someone shares a bad, it can be recontextualized in conversation and in company and in companionship. So that is, for me, the dance of life. The way that we interact with each other is very much a part of what turns me on. So this is a work by an artist named Huma Baba, and it was installed on the roof of the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York. And part of the gift of art, I think, is that it happens to sometimes confront us with some of the challenges of our life. So it's asking not just what happens, but how do you relate to it? So I think that with awareness comes choice. And so with a work of art that is sort of confrontational, not just the Bruce Nauman, which we looked at, but this one in some ways as well, what is this art asking of you? And if we come back to this idea that the work of art is a self-portrait, where might you find a self-portrait of yourself in this work? So this part of what's so magnificent, I think, about this sculpture is where it's placed. And the New York skyline is as much a character in this installation as the two works, the one that's bowing to the other. And, for me, I moved from Colorado where I had easy access to nature and got a lot of steps every day, to Orange County where I spent a lot of time sitting and, in the car. So it's it's a transition, right? I knew how to be in one space, and then coming to a new space, a new environment created new challenges for me, things that I never, really thought of before. So this work asks this idea of how do you surrender? And for me, surrendering really is not about losing. It's not about letting someone else win. It's very much about this idea of surrender being the opposite of control. So trying to kind of control every outcome, every circumstance, thinking that there is a way to actually do that. So the opposite of surrender, I think, also is anxiety, restlessness, hyperachieving. So I think that there is something within surrendering that is about letting go of expectations of self and other, and embracing the unknown. Gets back to that idea of coddywampling and, believing even when fear shows up, that there is something else guiding us, that there's an opportunity of being in the flow, of surrendering to that experience of life. So the question for you, if you have a notebook or you're on your phone, it's a question, how do you just surrender? And what does it feel like? What does it feel like to do so? So this is an artist named Glenn Ligon, and there's a lecture that I went to a couple of years ago, and one of the big takeaways for me was this idea that all you need to cross the universe, and that's like a science fiction term, but fill it in with whatever you want, all that you need to cross the universe is a hand to hold. So it's this idea that it's not about the journey, it's not about the destination, but rather it's about the company. And so I think that there is a moral imperative to be in relationship with life, and that life is about relationships. And this idea of crossing the universe with a hand to hold was so important to me that we have transcribed it and are using it in our wedding vows that are coming up in July. I'm getting married. So right? Yay. So this idea of what it feels like to be in relationship and to be beloved. And so in this work, it is super simple. It is me and we, and that all it takes to go from the singular to the dual or the partnered, or to be in a universal circumstance, is just an inversion. So you take the M and you invert it and it becomes a W. So I do a lot of yoga, and my favorite pose is the inversion, because it's such a simple act to just stand on your head or stand on your hands, and literally everything that you see is different. So this idea of going from me to we. So the question here is, when do you feel most loved? What does that feel like to be beloved? Is it when someone brings you your coffee in bed in the morning? Is it when someone remembers your birthday? Is it when someone holds the door and lets you go first? When do you feel most loved? Okay, so this is a work by an artist named John Curran. And I talked a little bit earlier about this notion of beauty. And in the art world, for a long time, beauty was seen as bad. People wanted to suffer, and they wanted to just have it be about thought. And but I love beauty, and I think that life is better when we are surrounded by beauty. I think that's one of the reasons why people live in California, honestly, because it's so beautiful here. So I think that oftentimes modern art is representative, and it is reflective, it is interpretive, and a simple portrait sometimes seems really straightforward. Yet there is symbolism, and there are things that go beyond random shapes and colors. So this woman might evoke different emotions in all of us. She might remind you of your mom, or she might remind you of a younger version of yourself or an older version of yourself. And upon those recognitions, different emotions get evoked. So there is an ambiguity enough about her that allows you to have your own thoughts and your own feelings. And when I say that works of art are self-portraits, and I tell you that this is by an artist named John Curran, of course, it's not a portrait of him. It's a portrait of his wife. And it's a portrait, I think, that creates this opportunity to really be engaged. And when I look at this work, I also think about the Botticelli and the Primavera, the Three Graces, and what it feels like to have this relationship with beauty over time. So I talked a little bit about like my own sort of softening when it comes to works of art and my understanding of what they are, and opening of my definition, and an embracing of something which is warmer, more open, less judgmental, less attached. And I really think that this sense of beauty is something that we can find not just in art, but in life, based on how we make choices about how we live. So the question is, where do you find beauty? So I believe that there is a direct correlation between what you receive and what you give. So this is a work by an artist named Rashid Johnson, and there are lots of different ways to think about it and look at it. We talked a little bit about this idea of surrender and what it feels like. So I think that surrendering can also be filled with exuberance. So when we surrender to uh, something that was really hard, like a long hike, or maybe a math problem for me, or an essay that's written. This image for me is very much about what it looks like to fully extend, to reach the highest heights, to fully give of yourself to everything that surrounds you. And the the question here for me really is, where are you most you? What does it feel like to be yourself? And how do we get to evolve and not be the same as we were? So looking at this work a decade ago, I had a really different perspective, than I would have now. Certainly, the Mark Rothko, I look at it differently than I do now. And that work, someone asked me earlier, like, oh, do I get to take any of the art home, particularly at the Mark Rothko? And I shared that painting is in the collection of the San Francisco Museum of Modern Art. That's a museum that I grew up going to, and it happens to be on view right now in an exhibition at the Louis Vuitton Museum in Paris. I got to see that over Christmas, and so when I first saw that work when I was growing up, I thought it was beautiful, mesmerizing, and simple. And then when I was in college, I was very much focused on the his untimely death by his own decision, and I could only see those late works as being associated with depression and sadness. And then when I saw them recently in Paris, I started to think about, well, what else was there? And the works that he made right before the end of his life were not actually the darkest ones. He started working with grays and whites again. So, life is cyclical, and the way that we know ourselves and the way that we know works of art change as we play this the perfect play of life. So asking the question, when are you the most you? When are you all of you? I also think that many of us spend a lot of time playing small, trying to make other people feel comfortable. So not being as excited about something because someone else doesn't have the same news, or trying to minimize our accomplishments, again, to try and make other people feel better. So people really do a great disservice to the world by playing small. So don't do it. So I told you that the Bruce Nauman was my mantra at the beginning, and this has evolved into being my new mantra. So this is a work by an artist named Martin Creed, and also works with text, and often done in this neon. And it says, everything's going to be all right. So it's a way better thing to repeat over and over in my head, right? The voice that's in my head now often tells me that everything's going to be all right. And I really love this idea that what we tell ourselves matters. How we talk to ourselves matter. And that we have this opportunity to live with intention, to swing the golf club with intention, to cook dinner for our families, with intention, to talk about art, to join in community. I love that this lecture was preceded by everyone turning around and introducing themselves to someone that they didn't know. I've only done that in one other place in my life, and that was a sacred space. So I love the idea that this space of being together in conversation and the sharing of ideas is a place to be in community. And I find that to be really inspiring and super intentional. So with this idea, that's how we live life as art, by doing so with intention. And so this is my thought for us at the end. When we pay attention, leave off the bad word. When we pay attention, everything's going to be all right, or even better. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much. You've given us a lot to think about, and hopefully there are people with some questions. So we have Alec and Delaney, our wonderful Maroon and Gray student ambassadors. Thank you for being here tonight to run the mics for us. Remember, we are live streaming and recording, so you do need to wait until a mic is brought to you. But who's got a question? Excellent.
Not really a question, but what you said I thought was beautiful, and you're saying that attention is a form of love, and I appreciated that.
Thank you. One of the things that was shared with me by my coach recently was this idea of it's a quote actually by Mother Teresa, and the idea was being a pencil in the hand of God. So the idea is that things work through us rather than than doing it ourselves, right? That there's I think of myself as a servant leader. And so that opportunity to be able to pay attention, and I agree with you, the idea of paying attention to people and to life itself is an act of love. So thank you for that comment.
Other questions? We've got one down here, Delaney. Oh, and you've got, okay, go ahead.
Yes, I was wondering where the everything is going to be all right is displayed. I think that, gosh, we could all use it everywhere.
Right? So it's really interesting. So a British artist, and this work has been installed in a lot of different places and always outside. Well, not always. We at the Aspen Art Museum, we actually put it inside, but it's almost always on facades of buildings. And the idea is to be able to bring this concept of not just the words, but the contemporary art out into the public space so that it's seen by people who aren't looking for it. And I think that sometimes you can have the biggest impact when you put something in front of people that they're not looking for. And because sometimes, again, as we started, like contemporary art can be weird or scary, and so people might not even go into a museum space. But if this concept that everything's going to be all right is out in the world, then people might take it with them and repeat it over and over again.
It made me think when I saw that when I was driving to work this morning and I, looking at my watch, what time, I got to hurry, whatever. And I pulled up behind a minivan at the corner of Redlands Boulevard and Cypress. And on the back window was a decal that said, "I hope something great happens to you today." And it was so nice and inspiring. And I was like, and I thought about it all day.
Yeah.
I mean, it's really amazing.
I love that.
Yeah.
I love that. And, it's, you never know who needs to hear what, right? And being intentional with the words that we use and giving people the benefit of the doubt and saying like, you guys are awesome. Thank you so much for coming tonight. Like you didn't have to. So I'm so honored by your presence, and I'm so honored by the opportunity to be in conversation and community with all of you.
I have a lot of questions I'd love to ask you tonight because I think you had several other programs you could have given, and I didn't expect to come and get some psychology, I guess, of art. And it's been very wonderful. And I want to say, first of all, that I love the artwork that you're wearing, bright and colorful and cheerful for us all. I think there's a lot of us in the audience here who have either are in the leadership for our new Museum of Redlands or who have contributed some of this money that you have raised, $50,000, and it is a continual fundraising thing. Could we sidestep your wonderful program, and could you give us just a hint of what the two most recent years of you getting the Orange County Museum of Art open, maybe a couple stories that would inspire us, because we have maybe one more year to get ours that we've been working 25 years to get open.
Absolutely. I can do that. So first of all, I'm going to give a shout out to my college roommate, Leslie Evers, who designed this blouse. And I often wear her clothes. You can get them online and some shops. And so, I've had the privilege of building 2 art museums now from the ground up and raising a lot of money for both of them. And I don't think there's really a secret to, and I'll say that both of them were not, I don't want to say stalled, but both of them, there had been a lot of time and effort involved before I arrived for either one. So, definitely standing on the shoulders of people who came before me. The Orange County Museum of Art had 17 designs over 14 years. Okay, so I don't know how many you have, but maybe don't feel bad. And the Aspen project was, 20 years also of effort. So these museum projects often take decades to do, and they're just slower. For a variety of reasons. And some of it is fundraising and some of it is, local politics and, a variety of things happen. My experience is that momentum happens when people feel confident in the leader and the leadership. So strong board and a strong museum leader, the CEO, the director, whatever they're called, and being able to articulate a vision. So when I came to the Orange County Museum of Art, well, I'll step back. When I came to the Aspen Art Museum, they were trying to be all things to all people. And, so if you like Japanese baskets and you showed up and there was a contemporary exhibition, you were mad. And if you liked contemporary art and you came and there were, Navajo weavings, you were mad because you never knew what to expect. So when I got there, I said, okay, with the board, we decided to focus on all contemporary art all the time. And to say, okay, you might not know a lot about contemporary art, but we're going to empower people to have an opinion, and we're going to bring everyone along. And this is what we show. So you can decide if you like it, if you don't like it, if you think it's good or it's bad, but this is what you're going to get when you're here. And so again, that kind of takes leadership because there were going to be some people that liked it the way it was before. So similar in some ways to Orange County, and the museum being really clear. Okay, our perspective is we're going to look back to move forward. We're going to honor the people who were here before us, and we're going to honor the 13 visionary women who founded the museum with a year-long exhibition, not about them, but inspired by them with works from the collection. And fundraising is really about the right person making the right ask at the right time. And it's also about having thick skin, right? So if it's not the right match for someone, it's no problem, right? It's fundraising is really about offering an opportunity to be a part of something that you think matters if you're making the ask. And if it's not values aligned for someone, then that's okay. So I don't know if that answers your question, but gives you a little bit.
Steve talking. I'm involved with this museum that Nelda is talking about, and two things that take away. I'm an engineer. I'm a builder, and when I'm with me, or it's when you're with you, among the things that I've created from the ground, a living structure. And one of the jobs I left, I was really sad leaving the things that were there. These inanimate objects, it had to do with water, and they seem really dumb, but that really got to me. And secondly, in Redlands, if you drive by this museum that we're in the process of creating, you'll find something you did not expect, because that's the way it looks.
For sure, we're driving by, on our way back to Orange County. So yeah, look, I love museums, and there are people who travel to go to museums, and there are people who go to museums when they travel. And I think it's really important to have museums in communities where people live, because that's most of who goes to the museum.
Another one up at the top, Delaney.
So I definitely could have given a talk on the Orange County Museum of Art, and what we did. And I kind of feel like it's been incredibly well covered in the press. We've been so fortunate by having our story really well told. And so I didn't want to share something with you today that I felt like you could read. But if you are looking for something specific that I didn't talk about, I'm happy to share my email address and be a resource as well.
Have you been to the Cheech? And if so, what was your...
Oh, I heard. Just start again on your question. It's on.
Oh, okay. There we go. Have you been to the Cheech? And if so, what was your reaction?
So I'm kind of embarrassed to say that I have not yet been there. I started at the museum 3 years ago, and I had basically 18 months to do what in Aspen I had 8 years to do. So I still don't even really know where to eat where I live. So we are planning a staff retreat there, and I've looked at pictures online, and I know a bit about the collection, but unfortunately I have not yet had the opportunity to go. Fantastic. Yeah, I really want to come.
really liked the things you said at the beginning about, at least the way I took your words, we're all artists if we want to be. I call myself an amateur photographer. And you know, the funny thing that happened along the way is the camera and cell phones makes everybody a photographer. And sometimes I feel threatened by that. But I'm really wondering if everybody's an artist, everybody's a photographer, who gets to curate these works, and who has the authority to do that? I mean, historically, artists were seemingly a small minority of the public.
Yeah.
And what you were saying is very, very different from that.
Yes and no. I believe in both and instead of either or. That's one of my kind of life practices. So, yes, I do think that we have the opportunity to expand this notion of what it means to be an artist. And I think that we can be an artist of our own lives. I drink matcha. Every morning I make my matcha, and I often take a photo of it and I often put it on my Instagram. I don't think I'm a photographer. I don't think I'm an artist in any way. I do know that I make the matcha every morning with intention, and I think that there is an artistry to that. Now, I don't believe in the abdication of responsibility in terms of connoisseurship. So I am a museum director, and I've worked in museums for 30 years. And for a long time, museums were places where it was museums took the perspective that they were in a position of authority and to tell people what to think, right? So it was like a one way conversation. It's like, it's in the museum, it's great, you should all like it, don't ask any questions, we're just telling you that it's great, and so you're welcome. And then there was sort of like museums 2.0, where there was like an abdication of responsibility. Exhibitions were being crowdsourced. People who had no knowledge about the history of art were being asked, what do you want to see inside of the museum? So it's this incredibly populist notion. And this idea, it's linked to this idea that, everyone gets an award when you show up, regardless of, your effort or whatnot. Or everyone's a curator, you get to design your tennis shoes. And I don't think that's interesting. So what we're doing now is probably museums 3.0, which is, hey, we think this is interesting. This is why we think it's interesting. This is what we know about the person who made it. Like, what do you think? Oh, you see this? And this reminds you of that? And you noticed this other thing? Huh. I didn't notice that. That's so interesting. Well, that makes me think of this, and that reminds me of that. And right, so it becomes a dialogue. So I do think that museums are a place of conversation, and welcome. And one of our goals and intentions at the Orange County Museum of Art, and we printed it right on the front door, is everyone is welcome. And so, we're not telling anyone what to think. We're suggesting that museums are a space for conversation and community. So I hope that addresses parts of your question, if not all of it.
Time for one more question. Anyone else have a? Oh, we got one more down here, Delaney.
I'm just wondering, because this is a very grown-up adulty conversation that we're having tonight, and I'm wondering what you do at your museum to encourage adults, whether they're parents and grandkids, to bring their kids? What type of youth programs you might have available? And also, if you were to give this presentation to a school, would you say the same, like, how would you deliver the same message to a younger audience?
Thank you. We have an exhibition that's on view right now, work from the collection by an artist named Charles Long, teaches actually at UC Riverside. And the work is called 100 Blocks of Clay, and it is 100 blocks of clay. And there are different colors, and the public is invited to take them down and make things with them and put them back on the blocks. And then we take photos of them and put them on Instagram. And the soundtrack in the gallery is the favorite albums of everyone who works on the museum staff. And we have big bean bags, and we have regular size tables, and we have like little kid size tables. And it is amazing. We've changed out that clay so many times because people combine it all. And it is also extraordinary, the talent of the people who are coming to the museum. And that space is packed all the time. So one of the things that we do, and I should say our museum is free. We have admission underwritten, courtesy of Lugano Diamonds. And the fact that the museum is free for the first 10 years means that people can come anytime they want. And there are always kids in the museum. And there are kids that come on their own, and they come in groups. So the building's also beautiful. So when we opened the museum, we did a 24-hour opening. So we were open 24 hours straight. And every hour on the hour, we did different programs. And we started off with the Pacific Symphony and the chorale. And we also did sunrise yoga. And we did, a sound bath and a silent disco, or not disco, but a silent dance party, on the roof deck sculpture garden at midnight. And the museum is very participatory. And within the first few minutes, honestly, of being open, and we had 20,000 visitors in the prior location before I was there. We had 10,000 visitors in the first 24 hours. And within the first 10 minutes maybe, and huge lines, there was like a TikTok spot, and an Instagram spot. And then people were coming in droves to then recreate, what they already saw someone else doing. So we're looking at creating the museum as like an art sanctuary, like a place with a shoulder lowering effect. Our frontline staff, everyone wears oatmeal colored clothes, and our security staff wears sky blue. So it's not everyone dressed in black with walkie talkies and, making people feel uncomfortable. So, that's a big part of it. And if I gave this talk to youth, I would probably do the same thing, except for the Bruce Nauman. I would probably have to put like a privacy shield over, the back word of it. But yeah, I think, I've been a mom basically my whole career, and I've always been conscious of what we show in the museum. I never have greenlit anything that would have embarrassed my kids or their classes. I always wanted them to come, and that's not what you see in every museum, but that's what we've always done. So,
all right, thank you so much, Heidi. This was great.